Hi, Dr. Rob.
Good evening, Tammy. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I am cool with a dash of summertime.
There you go. You're always cool. So now with the dash of
You
summertime.
know what? How much I wanted to be cool all the years I was an addict, but it wasn't cool. And now that I'm not actively an addict, I'm really cool. Isn't that weird? How does that work? Anyway, I'm so glad to be here. You guys know we're here to answer questions. We're here to spend the next hour answering questions about sex, love, and addiction in any of those that fit together. A lot of times we talk here to spouses and partners and families. Sometimes couples come on and ask questions together. Really, this is something that we do as service. We have 15 groups that run a week for all kinds of folks with all kinds of issues, partners, addicts, all kinds of folks. And Tammy will probably talk about that more as we get moving. But you want to start? You have a question for me?
We have several questions. So the first one says, "Thank you to both of us for all we do and offer, and for the correspondence. Sex and relationship healing has been my lifeline and the hardest part of a 4-year relationship with a sex addict. My current question is, how far into an addict's recovery is it determined whether the addict is a true covert narcissist or if that behavior was due to the addiction?"
Ooh, that's a.
I'll stop there, because it says I've been listening to the podcast, and there's one where Rob talks about. Actually, I'll keep going. Where Rob talks about narcissism and sex addiction, how sex addicts can look like narcissists. I know firsthand from the abuse and effects feel the same, and I'm confident that feels the same to the
I think
part.
she has a part three.
Yes, after feeling like this is only part one. After feeling like there was no hope for the survival of our marriage, that podcast sparked a little flicker. We have been separated for a month now, and even though I'm angry, understandably, at the lying and cheating, I still love and miss him. Codependence, and then get angry at myself for still caring and try to refocus on trauma bonding work. Yes, I'll stop here, and then let's answer because there's more. So let's start
Right.
here.
So I want to say to everybody else though is that Tammy has encountered a question that has a bunch of questions within it. So she's going to pose those questions. We're going to talk about them so that all of it can come out, whether useful to this person or everybody.
Correct. So the first part of it is, how long into recovery before you can determine if the addict is a true covert narcissist or if the behavior was due to addiction. Let's start with that.
Okay. Well, all of us are a little narcissistic. Let me just say that if in order to get up the courage to get up and face the day, you've got to be a little narcissistic. You've got to think you're going to be okay and the day's going to go well. And even if you're not feeling good about yourself, just the fact that you get yourself into your vehicle or whatever it is and get to work, that's narcissism. So we all have it. A narcissism at its best is self-esteem. It's an abundance of self-esteem. There's healthy narcissism where I just think really good about myself and I feel really good about my confidence. Okay, fine. Where it spills into being problematic is when narcissism isn't just about me celebrating me. I'm also don't see you at all. You're just an appendage, or you're just there to cheer for me. I don't really see you as a person. I appreciate that you're around because you make me feel good for me. All of that is more profound narcissism. What this person is recalling is something I talk about a lot, which is this. If you were a heroin addict and you needed money for heroin, you might go to your kid's college fund and take every penny out for heroin because you're a drug addict. However, that same person, if they got sober on heroin and really got their life together, a year or two later, they might start working 3 jobs to put that money back in because they adore their children and they want them to have money for school. So every addict, I'm explaining this for everybody. So every addict in the throes of addiction, we're not thinking about you or we're thinking about getting away with what we want to get away with and doing what we want to do. And that's what we're focused on. And anything that keeps us from that is in the way. Well, if you are actively addicted, it looks exactly the same as narcissism, because the only thing I care about is me and the drugs or me and the sex, or it still boils down to all I care about is me. And so someone who is narcissistic but not addicted, they're really focused on themselves, but it isn't because the addiction has pulled their self away. They're just so focused on the addiction they can't see anyone else. Real narcissists can't see anyone else, period. I think I'm saying a lot, and I don't mean to. This is a confusing topic because there's healthy narcissism. What you talk about, covert narcissist, I'm not sure I know what that means, but I know what I will say this. for somebody to come from active addiction to owning what they've done and stopping what they've done to feeling good enough about themselves to really be focused on other people, it can take years. You know, I'm a particularly difficult person, so probably I was 15 years into therapy before I knew other people existed, but as more than objects to support me. But I'm a particularly difficult case. I don't lose hope for anybody, but I also understand that for most people, except the really crazy, the degree of narcissism is just matched by the degree of emptiness they grew up with. You know, in order to treat people like an object, you have to have been treated like an object. In order to not realize how much you're hurting people when you do things, you must have been hurt a great deal and not be in touch with how much you were hurt. However, let me give you the quick answer to your question. You have to live with what you feel safe with and what you're comfortable with. If someone's behavior, even if they're trying their hardest, even they're doing, if it doesn't match what you need in your life and you're not able to, and you're always meeting them with an unhappy face, you're always feeling like the relationship isn't what you want, you're always hoping they're going to turn into the person you want them to be, that's not real either. That's your own narcissism, because you have to be in the relationship you're in with the person you're with and deal with it as it is. You can hope for the future, and with addiction, we do see things change quickly. But once the addiction has stopped and the most severe parts of that, the change in the personality is a long way. I mean, the road gets narrower for us, but it takes a long time. And so if you are so unhappy with someone and you really haven't seen the change that you're hoping to see at the pace you're hoping to see it, I wouldn't count on it happening anytime soon, because this person is already working at the pace they work at. So anyway, that's a whole bunch of answers to a very sort of broad question. You're on mute, my friend.
Yes, because I was headphones dinging. Sorry. So the next part mentions the podcast. So I'm hitting that information in the chat for those of you that want to take a look at that, because there is a podcast on narcissism, but there's podcasts on lots of different topics with lots of great guests. So then the next piece is I still love and miss him, then get angry at myself for still caring and try to refocus on trauma bonding work.
Okay, let's talk about that. Thank you, Tammy. And you mentioned codependence. So if you believe in the concept of prodependence and not codependence, that means that you would be able to say to yourself, you know, thank goodness I still feel connected and love that person, even though it might not be the right relationship for me or might not be the right path. You know, rather than saying, I can't believe that I still think warmly of him after all he did, that's mean to yourself. It's a good thing to stay connected to people, even if they're not the best people, even if they've hurt you. It's good to feel the feeling of connection. It's not a bad thing to have connected. Maybe you didn't connect to the right person at the right time in your life, but you can connect. And so what I hear in the fact, and Tammy's, I know, going to say this, what I hear in the fact that you're thinking of him is that you're grieving. You know, you're missing what you don't have. And there's nothing wrong with that. And there's nothing wrong with wanting something you don't have. There's nothing wrong with wishing something wasn't the way it is. And there's nothing wrong with feeling bad about that and missing the good parts. All of that's healthy. The only unhealthy part is beating yourself up for still thinking fondly of him. Now, behavior is different than thinking, like an addict. So thinking, missing, great. But if he's not changed, if he hasn't worked on himself, and you start calling and texting, and that's a different thing, because then you are basically playing out a fantasy, and you're going to end up in the same place you've ended up before with this person. So if he's not changing, if you don't see a reason for reaching out, you shouldn't be. Tammy, you have a comment about that, maybe?
Well, I know, I think you've covered, and I put prodependence.com in the chat too, because there's links, you know, talks about that. There's podcasts about that. There's lots of stuff. So
Tammy's dropping information in the chat list. That's why we ask you to ask your questions in the Q&A.
Yeah.
The chat is really for us to say, here's this book, here's this podcast, here's that, whatever. Thank you, Tammy. So,
okay, so the next piece is I'm having a hard time settling the fact that our marriage was a lie, even though that's what I feel, but it wasn't to me. My main focus has been on recovery and life responsibilities during this the separation, but the grieving sucks. Trying to tell myself I'm done, our relationship can't be saved, but part of me still questions if it's true. I fell for love bombing, or was there some truth to what he was saying in the beginning?
Okay, so I'm going to tell you what I know where you're at, and I've been there. I remember dating someone. I mean, I think I do. I remember dating somebody, and it didn't work out, and I really wanted it to work out. And then I was lonely, and after it ended, and I went to this therapist. And of course, you know, when you're in therapy and you're doing a breakup, let me tell you, there's no one who gets more of the details than the therapist. And so I told my therapist, you know, he had been there for when the relationship wasn't working, and I was explaining it then, this therapist. And then he was there when we broke up. And then he was there when I was at the part you're at, which is, well, but maybe I misread it, and maybe we could be different, and maybe. And so this is what he said to me then, and I would say this to you. Whatever relationship you have with that person, that's a relationship you're always going to have with that person. They can be more honest, they can be more direct, they can be more, but who you are together, how you spent time together, what you meant together, that's not going to change. So whatever ability he had to love you, that's probably about the ability he has to love. It might grow over the years, but if you need someone who's more available, if you need someone who's more respectful and he's not there, that's a grief issue, but not anything to act on. And by the way, I have this note to myself, maybe our marriage was a lie. Don't say that. I think that's very unfair too, because you know what you both experienced together, when it was good, it was probably really, really good. And even if it wasn't good in the way you wish it would, and I'm going to be clear about this, even if on the night of your honeymoon, he was out at a liquor store buying alcohol and he's an alcoholic, or even if he's a sex addict and during our honeymoon, he went and saw a hooker. Okay, I've heard those stories, right? On my honeymoon, I went, no, that's not honeymoon, not the honeymoon you would have wanted to have, and it's not the one you may have thought you had. But I also know from the addict's perspective that he or she was with you, did their best, showed up when they could, was there loving you. Maybe they couldn't tolerate what it meant to be married. Maybe they couldn't tolerate the feeling. They ran away into their addiction. Okay. But that doesn't mean that the love wasn't. Women often feel that if a man cheats, he doesn't love her or didn't love her, especially if he cheats a lot. And you have to be a man to understand that that's just not true. That we can absolutely compartmentalize our sexual lives and not really even think of it as cheating because we're different. And so when you say, well, maybe my marriage was a lie, you're saying because he slept with other people and he didn't tell me about it. And that's not true. What you shared is true and real and happened, but it was different for each of you in the way that each of you could do it. And be kind to yourself about that, because love is love, you know, even if it was shitty, it still deserves respect. Anyway, that's just enough. Sorry, Tammy.
No, it's all good. So the next question, do you recommend giving up things like caffeine, nicotine, sugar for recovering pornography addicts? What about alcohol if alcohol has never been an addiction?
Well, I think that it's important to eliminate the most problematic thing first, unless something else is getting in the way of your dealing with that. So let's say the porn is the issue for you or someone else. And alcohol really hasn't been a problem much in their life. They just drink occasionally, but they've noticed when they drink, then they come home and look at porn because alcohol is disinhibiting. And so when you're a little bit drunk and you come home, it's harder to say no. So that would mean that the alcohol is getting in the way of your primary goal, which is to not look at the porn. So if the caffeine is leaving you up half the night and not able to sleep, and you're drumming your fingers on the computer at night and you end up looking at porn because you can't sleep, well, then the caffeine is a problem. So, you know, it's really not about, in fact, I wouldn't recommend, Tammy may feel differently, but when you just try to do everything all at once, I think you might just lose your mind. And maybe you don't realize the degree to which the porn influences your neurochemistry, how many changes you're going through. And like that might be enough for a couple of months, unless whatever else you're doing is keeping you from being able to stop the porn. And then that has to be looked at too. Thoughts, Tammy?
No, I 100% agree. The only caveat I would say is if, because I've seen this a lot too, is like, okay, I gave up the porn or whatever, but now I've gained 50 pounds because I'm eating sugar like crazy. So if it's a switch, if you're just doing it the same as you did before you gave up the porn, then I 100% agree. Just focus on the one thing,
right.
You know. But if it's like, okay, now I'm going to eat every cake in sight, then it's now the next problem. So if it's going to be I'm just going to keep going to the next thing because I still don't want to deal with the underlying issues.
Or don't know how.
But yes. So, but then a higher level of care to get to those so that it isn't just, spinning through all the different forms of addictive behavior, might be the
But
most
Tammy's
helpful.
point is really well made here, I think. Tammy, thank you. Which is the other issue is co-occurring addictions, which is, switch. I have worked with women who stopped acting out with relationships, but they gained 100 pounds. And what they're doing is they're still keeping intimacy away, but in a whole different way. I've worked with guys who, they just started pouring themselves into working out 3 times a day. And so they weren't emotionally present for their families, but they were really in good shape, because they didn't deal with the underlying issue. So yeah, you kind of have to watch the rest of your life to see if any particular thing is getting too far out of joint, so to speak.
So the next question, my family supposed support system does not seem to believe that my husband's porn addiction and the subsequent trauma for me is a valid issue leading to our divorce. They seem to believe that I'm exaggerating my reactions. How do I convey to the family the reality and validity of my experience?
Well, I think you have. I think you have done a really good job. I'm absolutely sure, just hearing from how you wrote that note, that you did a very good job of articulating your experience to your family. The question is, how can I get them to support me and believe me? That's a different question. I'm sure you did a really good job of saying it. They don't want to hear it, or they're not able to hear it, or it's just and the way that they're choosing to push you away is by minimizing what you have to say. Oh, it's not that big a deal. Oh, you should put up with it. And I think there are only a couple of choices. One is you really, really need to find people who do understand what you're going through and can support you. And one of the ways you can do that is on this very site, we have support for spouses and partners. And you can go on female, male, whatever it is, and you can go talk and get support. And because whether or not your family is ever able to fully come along, you need the support with other people who understand. And you don't want to be alone having been cheated on. You don't want, these are things you need other people around for, but you may not want to talk to your mom or your sister. So please do take advantage of the drop-in groups. And Tammy will write Sex and Relationship Healing, where to find the group. But your family may never come along for whatever reasons. And, over time, I don't have time here, but as a therapist, my question would be to you, can you move on and do the work you need to do without your family understanding or accepting this? Because ultimately it's your relationship, it's your life, it's your partner, it's your pain, and it's no one else's job to decide what's important to you in your relationship. Now, I do understand this as an older person, that, us older people, we really, when I mean older, over 50, okay? Us older people, I think, have learned to value relationships in a different way. For example, absolute research tells me that if people are going to break up, they're probably going to break up in the first 10 to 12 years of a relationship, because that's when they have the least investment, but it's also when they're the youngest. And when people are in their late 40s to 60s, they're more likely, even in the same amount of pain, to try to save the relationship, because older folks kind of want to keep their comforts and learn how important and hard it is to get them. So as an older person, I, of course, want to tell you that finding someone you can love is hard. Finding someone who might love back is even harder. Finding someone you can sit through dinner with more than 3 times. There are a lot of reasons to be with the person you picked. But the only reason to really not be with them is if they're unable and unwilling to grow, and what they're doing and their lack of growth is hurting you. Anything else, Tammy?
Well, I was thinking that to me, it's about them. It isn't about you. I think, Dr. Rob, you have articulated very clearly, that this is, but for whatever reason, they are unwilling or unable, there's many people, there's so much stuff where they've got their own stuff that gets in the way of being able to understand and support you. So I do agree with, get the support where you can, like just because they're family and supposed support, I've talked before about, I've got people in different circles around me. There's the people that are really close that I know have my back. And then there's the other people. And then there's the other people that are less safe, but I need to be affiliated with them in some way. But, it's like, just because they're family doesn't mean they get to be in that little inner circle. It's like, if this person can be with me, great. If they can't, then, I have a different relationship with them.
And let me say one more thing about it, though, that I do think it's an opportunity to look at yourself and your relationship with your family. If you're in therapy yourself, and say, because a good things to talk about in therapy, are my expectations reasonable? Should I be expecting at 35 that my 60-year-old parents are going to, I don't know your situation, I'm just making this up, but you could be 20 and they're, 42, it could be, or who knows? I think getting some objectivity around this. There are a lot of things when I was younger, I just couldn't believe my family didn't care about, but they didn't. But the other part of it is also maybe, and I don't know, that maybe you have a history of having a family that hasn't always shown up for you when you needed them. And maybe this is an adult time to look back and say, wow, this is what it felt like all my life, to say, hey, I need something, and they just couldn't see me, and all the way across that continuum, whether you expect too much or they're just unable to give it. These are all things to look at in therapy, and a good opportunity to grow, but not fun, but good.
Agree. Okay, next question. I'm a heterosexual woman in recovery about 9 months. I've noticed the longer I'm in recovery, the stronger my boundaries are in the face of men making sexual harassing comments to me, catcalling, etc. I find it offensive and irritating, whereas before I would really feed off the attention. I find myself disgusted by any situation where men are objectifying me. I think that's healthy, but how do I survive in the world where men are so conditioned to objectify women, and I guess vice versa to an extent? I can't stand it.
Well, okay, how honest can I be, Tammy?
Honest. This is
Okay.
why people. That's
So
why we're here.
If I don't look attractive, particularly, people aren't going to probably harass me. And I know that in the Me Too world, we understand, believe me, I know a lot, that women get harassed whether they're young, old, attractive, it doesn't matter. But if you are having something come at you regularly that is directed at, hey babe, look at that pair, I probably would cover the girls up more because I didn't like how they were being noticed. And maybe I would, I don't know. And I'm not in any way trying to blame the victim. I'm simply saying, in this world, as we live in today, if you don't like the attention you're getting, put on a sweater. Because it just may be that's the way the world is, and we are all doing the best we can. On the other side of it, let me answer the other side of the question. There's something else that you talked about. So I would not be surprised that let me try it this way. I think there's a lot of people in early recovery, like you talk about being, I've got 6 months, a year, who start to realize that they're in a lot more pain than they thought. And that putting down the sex and the relationships and all of that, and putting down the using sex as power, using sex as, oh, you want me, I must be important, and seeing it for what it is, objectification, that once you start to see that, you may also, like your whole, how to say this, the whole house of cards that you've built your life on may fall. Meaning that the way you used to feel good about yourself and get attention, that's not around anymore. But also, it may also be that was let me see this right. Those of us who are hypersexual and oftentimes seductive in the world, when we put that down, what we don't realize is that served a purpose for us. We did it for a reason. And so, for example, I was pretty badly abused sexually as a child. I can be very suggestive, very sexy, sexual, hit on you, but if we're close and you are sexual with me or romantic with me, I might back away because that's scary to me because I was molested. And so for me, someone I love who is close to me coming out to me sexually can be a little scary. I need to want to control it. So all I'm saying to you is once you put down all the defenses of I'm using sex as power and you just put that away, you may find yourself scared of it. Scared that people are approaching you, feeling uncomfortable in ways that maybe another adult woman might not, because now you're feeling really sensitive. The way you protected yourself is gone, and you don't see yourself as being the biggest boobs on the block, and now you see yourself as being someone that you don't want to be treated that way. Now you may be experiencing what it's really like to have people treat you that way for the first time, and it may also be bringing things up from your past, and you may be, like many of us do, running in the I don't want anything to do with sex for a long time, which is not a bad place to be in if you're working on it in therapy. And, it may just be you're naturally responding to, wow, I just realized how much I don't want anything to do with any of that. That may be part of it too.
So, and I was thinking, like I was trying to think of, I've got, some coping things that I do when I'm in an uncomfortable situation, because you're right, this stuff is going to happen no matter, no matter what. And I invite you to find what works for you. For me, it was understanding I have no control over, is serenity prayer. I'm a program person in serenity prayer, and I only have control over myself and my actions and reactions. And I have no control over any of that. But I'll be darned if I'm going to let everybody affect my serenity. So I worked really hard on just, finding ways to calm myself down and being in the moment. And like lots of people do mindfulness things. I suck at it, but it's great stuff when you can. So I think if you can find a few things, because you're saying I can't stand it, and I feel the discomfort in that. Mm-hmm. But you have no control over, that external stuff. And so finding ways, to soothe yourself, calm yourself, that are effective and mindful, may be a way to help you through this period. Because I'm sure, like Dr. Rob said, it's very uncomfortable, because now you're on the flip side of things. But I think the pendulum will swing to where you'll, as some time has passed, you'll learn to be more okay with it. So it's kind of like hang in there for now. But, I believe this too shall pass. You'll get to a different stage.
Don't overreact.
Yeah.
Let it kind of roll over you.
So, yeah. Are there links between pornography addiction and OCD? If so, is the treatment different?
Good question. So I think this is a very complicated question, to be honest. The question is about obsessive compulsive disorder. So let me explain what obsessive compulsive disorder is. Obsessive compulsive disorder is, it's a brain problem. It has to do with anxiety that goes on for people who have it. And they get really anxious, and they have certain routines or rituals, obsessive rituals and routines, that they will go through over and over again to try to make themselves feel better or like everything's okay. So folks who are afraid, oh my God, what if I left the stove on, I better go check it. I thought I checked it, but maybe I better check it again. And I've checked the stove 12 times today. My hands are raw from washing because I'm afraid of bacteria, and those kinds of non-pleasurable acts that people engage in over and over again, taking the same exit because I'm afraid if I take a different exit on the freeway, something bad's going to happen, or making sure I count the ceiling tiles in this room every time I come in the room because that makes me, all of that is about safety and control, and it is a brain thing. And but the thing about how we traditionally look at obsessive compulsive disorders is that they are things that people do over and over again that don't bring pleasure. So hand washing, it does make me feel better, relieves anxiety. Oh, good, I washed my hands. Oh, phew, I checked the stove for the moment. But just like addiction makes you feel better and for the moment. But what people reach to in terms of making themselves feel better and reduce their anxiety in OCD is defined as non-pleasurable. Because if you're compulsively or repetitively seeking something that's pleasurable with the hope that it's going to make life better, that's an addiction. Drinking, using, eating, sexing, it's pleasurable and I'm using it to escape and feel better. It's non-pleasurable and I'm using it to escape to feel better, more obsessive compulsive. It's pleasurable and I'm using it because I like it and I use it to escape, more addiction. So masturbation, where does that fall? I have worked with clients who were, in my mind, compulsive masturbators. They masturbated to the point where they were bleeding, they had hurt themselves, and they would do it again anyway and end up in an emergency room. They would masturbate for hours and hours and hours. And to me, and they had other compulsive behaviors, like counting the ceiling tiles, so it wasn't just the masturbation. Those folks, when stable on medication, and everybody who has OCD needs some form of medication, nearly like 95%. And the good news is it helps. You are no longer obsessive and compulsive. It just goes away, or at least the volume gets turned down a lot. Okay. So are there people who are both obsessive compulsive and addicted? I think masturbation to porn is one area where I would wonder about that. And I don't know. When you engage porn, is it usually a pleasurable activity, or do you engage it to the point where you just got to keep doing it. It doesn't matter whether it hurts or not, and you got to go back again, and it's just different. And the flavor of it is different. The feeling of it is different. Are there people who have both? About but 15 or 20%, maybe less, maybe more like 15% of sex addicts I've seen who have OCD, maybe less. We have more incidence of ADHD. We see more people with attention deficit disorder at about 20%, but less so obsessive compulsive. But I think that lies more in the land of masturbation. So these are good questions to ask. I would be working a good program. I would also be talking to a psychiatrist if you really think that obsessive compulsive disorder might be a problem for you.
So there's a couple questions in the chat, so I'm going to move over there. So when a porn addiction ends, do other attractors pick up to fill the void, like shopping, eating, drinking, etc.?
Well, so I think this is the difference between addiction and recovery. So if I put down the porn and change nothing else in my life, then I'm going to be sitting around wondering what I'm going to do in the evening, and oh, the shopping looks really interesting, and oh, let me game for 3 hours, and before you know it, I've replaced the porn with that. If, however, I make a full and committed effort to expand my life past my computer, and that's what it takes, going to live meetings, interacting with people, joining a club, getting on the team, doing things I never wanted to do, but they're actually fun, and you need to be around people and meet people, you know, that's where life changes. That's where it moves from simply stopping the behavior to I'm living my life because I'm doing all these other things. And I think you're much less likely to get lost in gaming or spending or eating if you are out there living life than if you're sitting around saying, oh my God, I just got to get through one more hour not looking at porn. That's when you're going to end up doing other problematic things.
So there's another question in the chat. Can you please talk about how an intensive couples counseling course of treatment would work? My spouse and I have over 35 years of marriage. However, we still suffer from betrayal trauma from each of our respective infidelity in the 90s. Okay,
well, I think intensive work is whether it's a program we run or what is it, it's really about how much can you do in a short period of time. Are you going to solve the lifetime of questions and challenges you've had in your 35-year marriage? Probably not. And I think a good couples workshop, when you've been, and you're probably not 25 anymore either. So, if you're at my end of the spectrum, you're thinking about how much time do I have left? And if you're in that ballpark and you're a couple, I'd be thinking not so much about how can we work through the wounds of our past, but how can we enjoy the time we have in the present? And how can we put aside the past to find a way to enjoy and love in the present? I don't know whether I'm going to be here today or tomorrow, but I do know more certainly I'm not going to be here as long as I was a while ago. And if you're like me, you got to pick your battles. And I have to tell you, and I don't know, I hope Tammy agrees, I'm in an 18-year relationship, and I have learned, well, okay, I'll just try this. Just today, I was in the car, and I thought, I saw something in the garage. I was putting in the car, and I thought, that's really bothering me. It was something that my husband didn't do or did do. That's really bothered. I need to bring that up. And then I thought it through, and I've been coming home for 18 years, and I know now, if I come home and I say, hi, you need to do that, it's not going to be a good evening, and I realized that in the car because I've had it. So is it important for me to communicate what I need and get it? Yes. But do I need to make sure that the structure and boundaries and the supportive, loving nature of my relationship is in place first? Absolutely. Do I need to make sure that we're speaking more about what we each do right and less about we each do wrong? Yeah. I mean, that's what needs to put my relationship. And always understand that two people in a relationship are by nature selfish. And each one of us is looking for our turn, when are we going to be right? When are we going to get our way? It's how relationships work. I count my victories now more often in what I don't say and when I give my partner more time and I listen than getting my point across.
Yeah, it's that, do I want to be right or do I want to be happy? So, okay, so I did put information in. So Seeking Integrity Los Angeles is offering.
Oh, I didn't answer that question. Sorry.
Couples workshop. Well, you can finish. So yeah, but August 16th through 18th, and I put a link into it if anybody's interested in it. Paul Hartman, who's been doing couples work for a long time and does a great job, is the facilitator. I suspect Dr. Rob will pop over too, but it's one of those things where it's a great place to get a foundation and some tools on communication.
And what I would expect from a couples workshop in 3 days, since you always kind of want to have, what will I get, is how can we realign our goals so that we're going to be the most successful as a couple when we leave here. That, you know, whatever our priorities, how do we make sure our priorities individually and as a couple are aligned so that we can make sure every step of the way we're doing our best to follow some kind of path together. And that is really, if you get that out of a workshop, that would be amazing.
Well, and that link says the specific goals of this workshop, which, you know, if it's something you're interested in, let us know. So
let me just say a little bit more about, actually, I'm going to do a little short advertisement.
Okay.
So first of all, for those of you here who don't know this, I've been very fortunate to have a very busy podcast. I thought that there would be some people interested in the topic of love, sex, and addiction. And it turns out that there are. And I think also that people in podcast land, in my experience, are craving really meaningful content. I think there's a lot of interesting stuff about music and fashion, but when it comes to how to save my marriage, or what if I don't want to save my marriage, or how do I learn what love is, there's just not a lot of great stuff. So what I have done is I've collected every friend that Tammy and I have ever met in the treatment field, this is true, and we've reached out to them and said, would you be on the podcast? So all the famous therapists, if you're in the therapy field, you would know them, and if you're not, you wouldn't. But almost all the names are there, and because folks are really eager and willing to give their time if you ask. And so Sex, Love, and Addiction has turned out now to be a top 200 podcast in the United States. We just have so many people, I think 5,000 or 6,000 a show who are downloading. They just so want to be there. Were 150,000, 60,000 downloads. Anyway.
It was over 160 last I noticed.
Sex, Love, and Addiction.
And I put the link in the chat. It's already in there, so you can go find it. So
the other thing I want to say is that we do run treatment, and I am not ashamed to say that I run a treatment center. I have people there in treatment. We are here in Los Angeles, and I think the people I work with and that I've trained in are the best thing ever. And, you know, and I got about 100 years of experience working in that place. So I'm very excited about it. Anyway, if you're interested in learning more about treatment or workshops or any of that, or anything you want, write Tammy, because Tammy really knows so many people all over the U.S. and will make referrals, or if there's something we can help you with, great.
And outside of the U.S. as well, just so you know. But I want to go back to the podcast. We have not exhausted all of our friends and colleagues, so there are more podcasts on the way. So keep tuning in. Some of them are coming.
On Dr. Drew. I'm still working on
yeah, and some of them will come back for round 2. So there will be more. But yes, Dr. Rob has been continued to record on interesting topics with great guests.
And guess what, guys? In the digital age, we can see which are the most popular podcasts, and then we can invite those guests back and make sure that they say something more.
Which is what we've done. So, okay, back to questions. I'm a mid-50s single gay man. My primary addiction has been porn. I have been very resistant to accountability, anything. Who, what type of person should I pick as an accountability partner or person? I've had a hard time imagining how accountability will ever work. I think it will just make me angry and want to act out more.
Okay, so I'm really impressed with anybody who knows themselves as well as you do. And when you talk about knowing that you're resistant to accountability, that's a really important thing to know. Because what you are saying there is that person may ask me to do something or not do something, and I might disagree just because I don't like people. I like to be in control, and I don't like people telling me what to do. And that's a good thing to know, because that's a lot of what this whole program is about. Is letting people in, letting yourself be willing to be guided. I don't know why you are resistant to accountability, but I'll tell you why I am. I had a really problematic childhood too. They weren't very accountable to me or each other. And I learned really early in life, why bother? I can get away with lots of stuff. Why be accountable to anybody? The problem is not being accountable to anyone also means being lonely. It's part of the human condition to be accountable. Those of us who avoid accountability in life are also avoiding intimacy and deep, loving relationships. Because guess what, my friend? If you ever have a partner, want a partner, or you said you're single, well, this is part of not being single. Is being, I am absolutely accountable to my husband. I'm accountable to him when we were dating. I'm accountable to Tammy. I'm accountable to everyone in my life. That's what relationships are. So I think you have hit the nail on the head of what your addiction is about. It's not about your frustration at having to actually respond to another human being and keep your commitment. What you don't like is how much you need other people. You don't like how much we all have to depend on each other. And accountability is simply having to show up and depend on someone and follow through. That's all it is. So what I would say to you is, what you resist persists. Feel free to write that in the chat, Tammy. What we resist persists. And if you are looking to have more love, more intimacy, more, it's a much bigger question than you asked about porn. It's a whole question about how you're going to live your life. How do you, everything that you wrote in that question tells me why you're a porn addict, and what you need to do more of, which is to be more available to people, be more willing to give of yourself and not get your way. This is all the process that we're in, is becoming more generous, more giving, more empathic people. And what you are, if you don't mind my language, bitching about there is what I would wish for someone to have, the good fortune to have someone who is interested enough in them that they have to be accountable to them. Like, you're looking at this as a bad thing, and I'm thinking how lucky you are to have someone who's willing to take their time to guide you and help you in this way. And I think if you look at it that way, by the way, then they become much more like parents. Then you understand much more why you're resistant, because we don't like being dependent, and yet it's human nature.
Well, and I was also thinking, feeling like you're being told what to do. But, like the 12-step program is a suggested program of recovery. So, people can suggest to me, and I can, choose to do it or not. It's just, at the end of the day, what do I want? And if I want to keep doing the same things I've been doing, then I don't need an accountability partner. I don't need a program. I can keep going on my not so merry way and be just as the same. So yeah. And I like, if you took all my stuff away, I don't really want that, but if you took all my stuff away, what I really, really, really value at the end of the day is the connections. I'm willing to be accountable to Rob. I like that we have this interaction. I have accountability to my husband and other people too, but it's because they care, because I care. I don't want to be alone and by myself. So okay.
And let me say, I hope that you don't, whoever you are, I hope you don't hear this as criticism.
No.
We're not wanting to say, well, you just have to go. But if you're lonely, and loneliness, I think, is what drives us at 56 and single, to not want to look at porn, I hope. If you want, then it is an invitation to look at the larger picture of how you look at relationships, because the question you asked happened to just give Tammy and I a great opportunity to talk about that. Thank you.
Yes, so I'm going to take a pause. Thank you all for the interaction. This, Rob and I could talk, trust me, the entire hour, but it's way more fun to have questions that you guys are posing. So, all right, next question. What is the best way to respond to porn addict husband who is constantly blame shifting and defensive about everything? I assume that's active addiction too, because it doesn't sound like recovery.
I don't think it's polite for me to use the answer it's just not nice language. So why don't you start your answer and then I'll respond.
No,
what would you say?
No, I'm going to let you say yours.
Well, I don't.
You can be not. You can. Well, use the PG version.
Okay, I'm going to be. So I think that for those of us who are used to getting our way, used to pulling the wool over on your eyes, used to getting away with stuff, that when we now have to be accountable and show up, or you call us on something, it's very, very uncomfortable. It's like really new skin we don't want to have. I don't want anybody, the reason I did all this was so I could get away with it. I think that it is automatic for most of us to want to say, just give me a break, or, why are you always going after me? Or, whatever it is. I would maybe discuss with him, if he responds to you in that way, if he shifts blame, if he gets defensive, is he willing to come back to you like 24 hours or 48 hours later and have a conversation about that? And I would say this to him. There are things I'd like to say to you, not when you're in the moment of a problem, but when you're in a good place. Can we talk for a few minutes? Great. Sometimes I'm uncomfortable with stuff that's going on, and I want to bring it up, or I do bring it up, but you shift blame, you do this or that. Do you see that? Yes, have a conversation about it, and then decide how you're going to handle it. You can say to him when he's really angry, I think this is one of those times when I feel like you're shifting blame, but I know we can't talk about it. Could we talk about it tomorrow? He'll hear it if he's working. So, you can plant seeds about how you interact with each other. But his initial, like, oh, don't treat me like I'm a little kid and get mad at me. I'm not, that defensiveness is just going to be there for maybe forever.
Well, and you don't indicate if he's in active addiction or not, but if he's in active addiction, that it's all about being defensive and being able to protect, what I'm doing. So if he's in recovery, let's go to that. But Dr. Rob wrote a book about rebuilding trust, and that is about communicating. It's out of the doghouse, and it's very practical ways to work on a relationship. John Taylor does a great webinar on Mondays at noon Pacific time, and it's recorded, and he's got very practical tools that you can use that will help you on any relationship, but on a romantic relationship.
Tammy,
Yes.
if anyone wanted to, who said, oh, John Taylor, one of your webinars, and they said, I like that, where would I go find that? How do these folks go about, all of them, finding all of the webinars and stuff that are on the site so that they can drop in and listen to the stuff if they want to?
So I posted in the chat already, there is sexandrelationshiphealing.com, but now I'm going to post the previously recorded ones. So you've got a link to the current schedule. So you're joining this one live. There are drop-in groups, as we've mentioned, where you get to interact. They're not recorded, but you get to interact with other people who identify as a male addict, a female partner, a male partner, a gay man, and so a porn addict, all of those. Professionals for those in the mental health field, or a physician. It's specific for licensed people. So it's password protected. So anyway, there are so many resources on that website. If you haven't perused it, please do so. There's just
this is where we give stuff away. This is what
it's all
we're
free. So
I want you guys to understand, we can't do therapy across state lines. Portability doesn't allow it. None of us, I give you the best therapist in the world, and I can't treat you if you live in Omaha, but I can support you for free. And so I have people all over the country, they're not doing therapy, they're volunteering to sit in these rooms and make sure that, no one says the wrong thing, and no one, or some of them are giving lectures and really doing training, and they're just volunteering. So we don't charge for any of it. The goal is to give you guys, understand though that there are people in treatment with us who, when they leave us, they'll get to keep learning those things and keep attending those groups. And we have a purpose, which is to pull people together. But we don't have a purpose in terms of making any big bucks off that site. So drop in, it's all free.
So I just put information about the treatment. It's for men. Dr. Rob has been very specific. It's gender separate. So this treatment program is just for men. And the information, the link is there, and you can ask me questions if you have questions about the treatment. So next question, you ready?
Yeah.
What is emptiness? Is there a way to describe that in terms of sensation in the body?
Tammy?
Well, to me, it's what I was trying to fill with addiction. So it's there was I always think of it as the hole in my soul kind of thing, and I was always trying to stuff it. I wanted it or numb it out. I didn't want to feel it. So yeah, to me, there was a sensation in my body, and learning to be in recovery, I don't have that. I have, I don't have the emptiness. I don't have the chaos. I have more hours of more days, a sense of serenity. Thoughts?
Well, I'm writing something down because I don't know what it feels like, but I have a word for it, or two words for it. It feels to me like, okay. So to me, it feels like some combination of sad and hungry at the same time, but not hungry for food, hungry for connection, but unfulfilled. So that it's like emptiness to me is like holding out my arms and there's just no one coming. But my arms are open and I'm hoping and I'm thinking, but there's no one there. That to me is emptiness. I'm hungry for connection, but it's not, and I'm open to it. It's just not there.
So I read a book from Terry Real on men depressions, and I think my fiance has all the symptoms of using sex and love to hide a covert depression. Will sex addiction treatment also treat the depression? Is it hiding, or are these separate problems that need different types of treatment?
That was too many questions, because those are different questions. So can you break that down? Sorry.
Sure. I think my fiance has all the symptoms of using sex and love to hide a covert depression.
So there are two ways this can work. I've rarely seen it work. I've only seen it work one way, but I hear it can work too. I hear that people who are depressed sometimes can use porn and sex to make themselves feel better, and then when they no longer are depressed or sad, they don't need or use the porn anymore. And I think that there is that category of person. I would call them like an at-risk user, someone who uses porn, or occasionally they hook up sexually and they use it really to boost their mood and feel better, and they haven't really no connection to the experience. It's just an escape. But they're not hooked on it. It's not compulsive. It's just something you do occasionally. And that is something different than, and it may be that that person gets treated for depression, or, you know, maybe their mother just died and they're depressed, so they're turning to people and sex, but it's not a compulsive condition that has been challenging throughout their lifespan. In other words, and I think this is true for those people, it will come and go. Like if I'm depressed and having a hard time in life, I might pick up on the porn and pick up on the sexuality because it's really tied to my depression. But if you are someone who's been dealing with your various stuff inside, using sex and intensity since you were 4 or 6 or 10 or 15, then it's a lifelong pattern of using sexuality or self-gratification, something like that, to make yourself feel better. It's not so. Let me answer your question. In intensive programs, we absolutely look at all the pieces of it. I'm looking at depression, anxiety, mental health, the mental health of your family, physical health, I mean, all of it. But ultimately, if you have depression, it's probably going to exist separately from your acting out. I might be able to treat your depression. I will identify your depression. We'll get your medication. We'll talk about it. But that doesn't really resolve the addiction problem. Addiction is a problem unto itself that requires its own guidance. Most people don't stop a compulsive or addictive behavior because they go on an antidepressant and they feel better. They are now just feeling better and keeping doing what they're doing. In order to learn how to live differently, you need to learn how to live differently. And so they are different. I'll tell you something else too. And this was my experience for a long time, I was so ashamed of myself I was acting out so frequently, and I was so ashamed of it, and I hated myself so much for it, and it was making my life so miserable that I was really, really depressed. And when I got into 12-step program and I started going to therapy, a lot of my depression lifted because I had hope for change. My relationships were going better. I was feeling better about myself, and I didn't need the antidepressant because, at least not for a number of years. I needed it as I aged, but in the early stages, it was more about, wow, when I'm not lying, when I'm not cheating, when I'm not hurting myself, then I feel better. Wow, and you start to feel better just from that. Also, all the connections people make in recovery and the support they get, therapy groups, 12-step program sponsors, all of the drop-in groups, this usually makes people feel better. So that's a long-winded way of saying, if there's a deep connection between someone's depression and their sexual behavior, they're not going to get less depressed. No, actually, I'm sorry. I can't say any more about that, Tammy. I ran out of words. Can you jump in there?
Well, I just wanted, because will sex addiction treatment also treat the depression, or how do you?
Yes.
So I know at Seeking Integrity, people are thoroughly assessed. So if they're thoroughly assessed, and some of them do receive a psychiatric evaluation to find out if they're clinically depressed, because, I think most people, when they give up their addiction, are struggling, at least initially, with depression, because it really is oh my gosh, I don't even know how I'm going to do this. So, and it's the fear and shame.
And look at what a mess I made of my life.
Yes. And confronting that, like coming up against that. So in a qualified treatment center that would be thoroughly assessed to find out if it's clinical or if it's just part of the recovery process. So some people do need, some meds for an interim period of time. Some people need meds for a longer period of time. But, it really is about having a qualified professional, assess and address that.
And I read Terry's book, and I recommend Terry's book. It's called,
it's on our list.
I know what it's called. It's called I Don't Want to Talk About It.
Yes.
A Legacy of Men in Depression. But I believe that, and I could be wrong, but he writes about his dad who's alcoholic, and his dad is depressed. They're different things. He has to deal with his alcoholism, and he has to deal with his depression. And really the point of that ramble I made is simply this. Probably the behavioral issues are not going to be resolved simply by resolving depression. Would surprise me.
Okay. So for the lady asking questions, thank you. We're 32 years married and I got disclosure 6 months ago. The grief is overwhelming. He's trying so hard to change his addiction, but I'm stuck in sadness and disbelief. My thoughts keep going round and round, so hard and so sad at what feels like 32 years that has been a lie. I just started a journal to try and shift internal thoughts, and that is helping a little. And thanks for you guys for being here. It's helped so much.
Hey, Tammy.
Yes.
I'd like to answer the most recent question. Not you, but the most recent. And you could answer that one.
Do you recommend treatment for female?
Yeah.
Where do you recommend?
And where she can look online and who we have friends.
That is, it depends. Can
you read the question?
Sure. Where do you recommend treatment for female SAs? I would love it if you did it once a year program for us. We need help too, although fewer in number. Yes. So if people aren't coming to Seeking Integrity, which if you're female, you're not, but there's a handful of qualified treatment programs, and I really do try to find out what you're really struggling. Some people are struggling with co-occurring things. Some people are struggling with some dual diagnosis. So I don't just give recommendations of places. I actually do try to discern what might be the best fit for you. So that would be an email me, and I will do my best. Okay.
And I think we heard a suggestion, which is, would you do a workshop or a program once a year for women? And I think that's something we could put on.
And well, it's actually on the Seeking Integrity list of having more treatment for men, and then also having programming for women. So we've got the couples. We're a little tiny organization, and we're doing really great work with men in treatment. But it takes resources, both financial and people, and to pull all of this off. So hang with us. But so for right now, we don't have that. Is it on our radar for eventually? Yes.
Okay, I want to answer. Someone asked how else they can find me online. So on Friday nights, I'm
typing that in right now. Huh.
I show up for an organization called In the Rooms, and that is it's a group that has lots and lots of 12-step programs online, and I'm there every Friday night, 6 o'clock California time. I have been for about 2 years now, just answering questions about sex, love, and addiction. And a lot of times in those rooms, In the Rooms, it's a lot of folks in alcohol and drug recovery who they're running into for the first time, wow, I just got sober and I don't want to have sex anymore. I wonder why. Or I just got sober and I'm hitting on everyone I meet. What is that? Just like the basic questions. But there are a lot of sex and love addicts showing up there too. Anyway, my point is you can ask questions twice a week, on Mondays on sex and relationship healing at 5 o'clock, and on Fridays on In the Rooms at 6 California time. And it is my pleasure to bring you that and do the service for you. Tammy, are you doing good? Are we good?
We are. We as is typical, we're going to miss a few questions. And
No, but I want dinner.
I know. That's why I said we're going to miss a few questions. So that's why when I get on, I say ask your question early so that we can get to yours.
And I'll see you guys on Friday.
Come back. Yes, I typed in therooms.com. In the chat. So all of that's going away. So grab those links if you want them. As soon as I hit stop, it's going away. But if you didn't get your question asked and answered, please join us again next Monday night.
And let me just say this: if you have something that's very, very personal, I mean really personal, and you don't want anyone to see it, you can write me at rob@seekingintegrity.com. If it's something I can answer, I will. If it's something that I don't know how to answer, I'll let you know or point you in the right direction. But sometimes,
or you'll forward to me. That's what.
Well, no, I wouldn't forward it.
No. But like if I need a treatment,
but I might ask you the question.
Or whatever. Yeah. So.
Anyway, you guys, thank you for showing up. If you weren't there, we wouldn't be able to do this, and it's a gift for us.
Exactly. Thanks so much. See you next week.
Bye for now.
Bye.